My name's Elizabeth Major. I'm a third semester master's student at UNC Charlotte. I work in our Center for Applied GIS. And I'm going to be presenting my research exploring SNAPscapes, making sense of the food access landscape in North Carolina. So this is actually kind of an umbrella term for two separate projects. The first one is a paper I co-authored with my advisor and another professor. And the second is my subsequent thesis research, which I'm currently working on, so it's still in the works. But the paper was actually the product of a targeted seed grant at UNCC, which was kind of a really cool funding opportunity that allows our staff to work with professors in different departments. So this was a collaboration between public health and geography, focused on food access. And our question was, do people who receive supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits have a significantly different food access landscape than those who do not participate in the program? So supplemental nutrition assistance program is more commonly known as SNAP or previously food stamps, and it helps something like, at last count, 1 in 7 Americans purchase their groceries. So this is a pretty significant number of people that we're looking at here. And then I've taken the results of that and kind of rolled in a few more things to try and answer the question, can we use the data available to identify specific types of food access problems throughout the landscape in North Carolina? So this kind of research is based on the idea that having access to healthy options kind of encourages healthy behaviors. So overall, we want to make sure everyone, no matter their circumstances, has access to parks, medical facilities, and healthy food. A lot of the initial research in this area has to do with food deserts and food swamps. So food deserts being areas where you don't have access to a healthy food store, or food swamps being where you have too many unhealthy options in comparison to the number of healthy options. However, a lot of the recent research has kind of moved away from this very black and white description of food access and moved towards something that's a little bit more descriptive. And these metrics incorporate transit or whatever specific thing you want to look at. And ours, as I stated, is SNAP benefits. So our question is, do people who use SNAP have a significantly different food access landscape from those who do not use SNAP? We wanted to look, at least to start, at the state of North Carolina, and based on the block group level, which is the smallest level we could get all of our data at. So for each of these block groups, we wanted to know the percentage of people on SNAP. We wanted to know how far they were traveling, so the minimum distance to a store. We wanted to know if they fell into the USDA definition for a food desert. So for urban areas, that's going to be you're within 1 mile of a food store that has all of the options. And for rural areas, it's 10 miles. And we also wanted to break down the different types of stores that everyone has access to. So we did a separate one categorization that's just looking at full service, so someplace where you can get everything you need, versus limited service, which would be something like a convenience store or a drugstore. And then we also looked at everything separately according to its category. In our metric, we also specifically wanted to use network distances. This is an image from our paper. If you can see, the gray circles are representing the overall Euclidean distance of 1 mile or 10 miles, and then the blue catchment is supposed to be a more realistic understanding of what the travel for a person on the road is going to look like. So we wanted to work within 1 or 10 miles networked. I'm going to skip this one to show you this fun graphic here of our process. So we started out with these US Census's population-weighted centroids for each block group as a proxy for the distance. And we first made sure that it had households, because the census will drop a tract or a block group over bodies of water, all kinds of things like that. We wanted to make sure it's someplace people actually live. And then if it was, we used the ArcGIS Online API and Python to find a route to all of the USDA registered stores that are in its vicinity. Once we found this, we filtered it down to these 1 in 10 miles, and then discarded everything that wasn't within that threshold. once we had that, I think that was something, what was left was something like 80,000 routes, and we aggregated those to each block group in MySQL. So with this aggregation for each block group, we end up with a minimum time, a minimum distance, an average time, an average distance, and a store count for each different type of store. We mapped those, but we also did an overall measure of central tendency for low SNAP versus high SNAP urban and rural block groups. So we found the median for each of those four. And then we did a Wilcoxon and chi-squared test, which is not my department, so I can't really answer the statistics questions, in order to figure out if these two different results were significantly different. And this is a table summarizing what we found. The first column on the left over here is showing just the overall percentage of block groups that actually have access versus the ones that don't. So we found a significant difference for urban block groups for both full and limited variety stores. We found high block groups with a high percentage of SNAP participants tended to be more likely to have a store. We also found that they were high SNAP urban block groups tended to be closer to a limited variety store and also have more stores. For rural, we didn't have as significant of results because it's a bigger catchment. But we did find that there was a significant difference between the high and low SNAP block groups with regard to the distance to a limited variety store. Oh, and this is a map showing the overall, all of the block groups in North Carolina that don't have a store. So overall, we found urban neighborhoods with a lot of SNAP participants are more likely to be closer to have a store within range overall. They're more likely to have a closer limited service store, and they're more likely to have more limited service stores. And then the rural block groups we found, they tend to have a closer limited service store. So this kind of runs counter to a lot of what you think of a food desert being. The literature tends to throw in food deserts with areas of deprivation where you don't have people with the purchasing power. So this was a little bit different from what we expected. Obviously, these findings come with some limitations. This doesn't take into account the quality of the food, the offerings or the pricing that the stores have, of offerings aside from what they initially categorize themselves as. And all of these in surveys are considered to be important in how people decide where to shop. So it also only accounts for drivers. We only did driving routes. We also lost a lot of information by filtering down to the 1 mile, 10 mile network distance. And we lost a lot of detail by just using these medians. So to kind of show this is a map that I made, a bivariate map showing the number of limited service stores versus the number of full service stores. And you can see in the cities, the box on the left is Charlotte, and we have Greensboro and Raleigh. There's a huge number of variation in the block groups. The dark green ones, if you can't see, are the ones where there's a high number of, or the bright green ones, it's a high number of limited service stores and no full service stores and no limited service stores. The pink are the opposite, where you have a lot of limited service stores and no full service stores. So in light of this, there's a lot of variation that you kind of miss when you just look at the state overall, these medians. So I kind of wanted to roll these results into something that I could look at and categorize the block groups separately into all these different groups. Keep the detail, but just know what is kind of going on. So I wanted to incorporate demographics, and also I thought that it would definitely benefit from being more than just driving. So my question is, how can we use the results of the previous study, census data, and features of the built environment to reveal specific types of access problems to guide planning efforts? And in order to do this, I wanted to create a geodemographic segmentation of the state of North Carolina, which would basically take all these factors, separate block groups into individual groups with different access scenarios, and then you could look at it and have like a targeted strategy for this kind of group. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with geodemographic segmentation, its basic definition is the analysis of people by where they live. I think that applies to a lot of things we do. So a better working definition is a classification where statistical methods have been used to sort areas into groups such that the difference within groups are smaller than the differences between groups. Now, geodemographic segmentation has traditionally been a marketing technique. So this is an example of the Esri tapestry geodemographic segmentation. Have you guys played with this? It takes a zip code and then tells you what percentage of type of person is going to live there so that you can better decide how to sell to that area, I suppose. But some of the recent applications have actually been public health segmentations in order to better plan public health strategies. So this is a screenshot of Hull, which I believe is in Iowa, and it's from the Acorn segmentation that shows different health outcomes. So the red is unhealthy, people were worried about, and then it goes from there. So in light of this, I want to use this data to create my own geodemographic segmentation. I want to use census data, including vehicle dependency, income level, and SNAP demand. And then I'd like to pull in those results from our previous study, but also incorporate, if people are not driving, what the walkscape looks like, what it looks like if you're biking or if you're taking transit. So I'm probably going to be pulling those with some web scraping. And this is still in progress for me, but as of right now, I'm planning to use k-means clustering to separate these into groups, probably using R, and it's going to be a lot of attempts to get an accurate segmentation. And then once I have a segmentation I'm happy with, I'm going to use the detail within each of these groups to create different profiles of the different types of access problems. And then kind of hopefully be able to recommend a strategy for each of those situations. I, of course, want to map my results. And I would like to create a web portal. And then I'm going to have a validation step. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. It's still very early on. I'm not from Charlotte or even North Carolina, so I can't really look at it and say, oh, this is right. But I'm trying to figure out what at this point is going to be within the scope of the thesis project. And ultimately, I want to have a comprehensive segmentation of access problems throughout the state of North Carolina, where you can pick out a block group, select it, it tells you what you're looking at specifically, what kind of access problems people tend to have there, and what a strategy might be. So this concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank my co-authors, faculty at UNCC, and all of y'all for listening. Any questions?